Having gardens outside is great. You can enjoy plants as they naturally bloom throughout the season, but you can also bring that outdoors inside. And what you have to do is just go out in your garden, and before plants actually come into flower, for example, something like quince, you can cut them when they're in bud. And then you can even wrap them in wet burlap or put them in a bucket of cool water, keep them in a garage, and when you're ready to bring them indoors, put them in a vase with warm water. And then heat in the home will give you something just like this. There are other plants that you could force: dogwoods, cherries, red buds, forsythia, lots of flowers and branches of plants that you can enjoy at least a month before they normally bloom in the garden. And let me show you some of these other plants now. Crab apples are easy to force indoors, and many of them are right in our own backyard already. And if not, you can plant crab apples. When you're cutting from your garden, I always like to cut long, beautiful displays of the plant, not short, stubby branches. So branches that are anywhere from 1 to 3 years old. This is the beautiful pearl bush, which is known as the bride. And you have to have this. This is Coreopsis, and it has these beautiful hanging flowers. So you're going to cut this in bud, and when you bring it indoors, the warm water and the warmth will force it into flowering like this. A lot of us have red buds in our garden, or we have access to red buds. And this is one of my favorite red buds, known as the pure white or white red bud, or Cercis alba. And what you want to do is cut them when the buds are nice and fat, just like this. And if you want to hold them for a week or two, you can even put them in a refrigerator and wrap them in moist paper towels or blankets or burlap to keep them for another week or two. These are all easy to use from your garden, and they'll give you wonderful displays that you can mix together or have as a single item in each vase. The longest part was going out and cutting all the plants in bud. Now remember, you have to time this. You really don't want to wait till they're in full flower. You want to cut them when they're in bud so they bloom earlier than normal. Now this is a cherry that after forced will look like this, and when you cut it, you might even cut them when they have buds that are smaller than this. Other plants that you can consider using are going to be the magnolia and the beautiful purple, or there's even yellow and even white magnolias. They're going to be cut when they're in bud, and then when you force them indoors, they're going to come into flower like this. And one of my favorite magnolias to use is known as the star magnolia. This is one that many times gets frozen in the garden in the spring. So if you cut it early enough, you can bypass that late frost that you might have. Coreopsis is great. Again, when you cut it, it's going to sort of look like this with small buds, and then when it comes into flower, it's going to be like this. To give you a great example of what forsythia is going to look like when you cut it in the garden, forsythia, when you're cutting it, it's going to look like this with buds ready to pop, and when you force it indoors, they look like this. So it gives you a whole month earlier and bring that outdoors indoors. When you're all done, I'll show you what it's going to look like in the home. This is the fun part. Instead of this being your cherry or this being your forsythia, you can have this great arrangement indoors a month before spring hits outside in your garden. I'm Mark Viette. Join me next time in the garden.
For more garden tips, go to inthegardenradio.com.